good to have his perspective.
Cool. Bunch of out of offices coming up. Take a look. The only thing I'll highlight is mine will be East Coast time for the next 2-ish weeks. So it'll make me an hour closer to Pedro and Andre and Tomas and some other people, but it'll make me an hour further away from some others. So just as an FYI. And then you've got the next one.
Sure. So I just wanted to quickly grab the opportunity to discuss a little bit of the ideas that came up on that brainstorming issue. And so the idea for that issue is just to grab any potential things that we might not have thought, or just to promote deeper discussions. And I think we have already some good insight there and a bit of a validation for the ideas that we've had in the past. I highlighted there the auto single file mode that David suggested. So it seems like we do have some support for that. Server-side rendering came up again. And that's always one of the things that comes up. But I wanted to drill deep on the one that Carrie brought up, because a lot of the things that we do today that are heavy and have to be checked a bunch of times, and it takes time, and it takes time to render them in particular. We could potentially get a really good quantum leap improvement if we flip it on its head and we do some pre-calculations instead of only calculating certain things on page load. She goes deeper into that rabbit hole a little bit on her comment, but I do like that idea. I do like that idea of when something happens to a merge request, we know what that affects. Somebody pushes a commit, that changes the diffs. Somebody adds a comment, that's just the discussions or potentially the mergeability is changed. Now, it's far easier said than done because just the mergeability is like thousands of checks, as Pedro very well showed in the mapping of the merge request widget. Yeah, I wanted to see how can we go from here, and especially more on this particular topic of pre-calculating things that is taking long to calculate on page load. Is there anything that pops to mind that could be beneficial for us to work on, like right off from 14.0? Yeah, anybody has any ideas on it? Or should you open an issue for that particular topic and we discuss it there?
I saw this one and I was sort of curious if this is like counter to the other direction that we're trying to take, which is like have everything more real time on the page, or if it's like a cross between them, right? Because one of the things that like we're trying to do is use WebSockets so that everything is updated on the page so you don't have to refresh. And like if everything was sort of pre-calculated and cached, then I guess you'd come back in and like do all those things, but I wonder if this is like driving in a different direction almost.
Yeah, that's a good question. My perspective is that when we're rendering the page, we would have that data already available. So is it mergeable? Boom, we just gave it a true or false, right? Instead of having to go and check a bunch of things. So it's faster to get that response. What then would happen is on the events that change the state or change the comments or the notes or the resolvability of a note or something, in that event, we would do two things. One would be to update the state that needs to be updated and send it down the pipeline of real-time WebSocket saying, hey, a new comment was just posted. Do whatever you want with it. But at the same time, we'll update the state so that the next time the MR is rendered, we'll have that already pre-rendered, pre-calculated. So I don't think it's conflicting. I think it's still supportive. I don't know about the backend architecture that we would need to do such a thing. But from my perspective, from our perspective on the front end, you could save us some cycles.
You know how hard it is.
Yeah. Not really. I think that's what we need to get to the bottom of, especially what would be pre-calculated. So the mergeable state is kind of like the biggest one, because it's just, if I could just read a true or false, then it's far quicker than having a spinner saying, is this mergeable? That seems like the quickest win to cover that. But it could be extended to the diffs. Like if the diffs are cached and stored somewhere every time a commit is made, then we can benefit. But again, I'm clueless on that, what that would entail on the back end. So it sounds like at least a spike would be beneficial to dig into this. But I was wondering if we had more actionable things than just a spike. Any thoughts? Any ideas? I know this is a broad scope, and I think that's what I liked about this feedback is very like open-ended. But now we have to drill it down. So unless somebody objects, I think I'll open an issue, bring this comment there, and we can get to the bottom of exactly what would be. So Tong talks about like prioritizing the things that we really want to provide to the user every time they reach the MR, like the pipeline and the latest version of the diff. So that crosses over to other stages, but it might make sense for us to test something within code review to see what would be the benefits of it, and leveraging caching more or something like that would be interesting to do during this quarter, because I think that would benefit the whole thing, the whole OKR. But I'll open an issue and I'll share it on Slack so we can all follow along. But right now, I'm just curious whether we have time to turn this into a deliverable for 14.0, or do we just schedule a spike? That's my biggest question. And right, I'll take that action. Anything? I know that there's a couple of other ideas there. I haven't converted everything into an issue or anything, but there's a couple of ideas there as well that are still worth pursuing, that we'll use this issue as a guide in the next couple of days and weeks.
Well, thanks, Andre, for putting this together and soliciting the feedback. I think it's good to get people thinking, and it's nice to see people outside of our group thinking about it as well. The real key is going to be finding what can we do in 2 milestones to move the needle. So,
yeah.
What at the moment is there an issue that we can follow, or a place that has the issues that we're already working on to improve the performance? Are those with the label, the large MR label?
Yeah, anything with the label would be issues that we think are targeting this. And right now there's not really anything there. And so we need to be figuring out what those pieces are that are actually going to move the needle. I don't even know that there's anything in 14 yet that sort of says, I think the closest we've got is the virtual scrolling effort, but we know there's some other things there that we need to test to figure out if we can use that or not. We've got outstanding issues to Giddily for some other things that could potentially be in this realm, but we haven't heard back there yet either.
Yeah, Phil created an epic for the virtual scrolling, which does include a couple of side effects that we would need to address. I don't think those issues are labeled with that label. So, so Phil created this issue, this epic. And there's a couple of issues already, and I expect this list to grow as we go through reviews and we go through experimentation with the virtual scrolling. But one of the things we already have identified that is broken and need work is those 3 issues. The first is allowing us to enable it even if the feature flag is off. This will allow us to test on the site speed by specifying URL. We'll have a tracking already, even though the feature flag is off. And then it's linking to a discussion and linking to a file it's kind of like broken at the moment. We need to fix it. But that's the things we already identified, but we expect this list to grow a little bit more as we go through reviews. So. Yeah, they don't have the label. I'll add them. Cool. Pedro, you have a question?
Yeah, it's a quick question. I have others related to this, but I think this is a quick one. Do we know, can someone explain me the difference between these results that we have in the handbook and that are, I think, Grafana dashboards, and then we have other results stored in that wiki of the quality performance project?
Sure. So basically the ones we have in the handbook, they're kind of historical. They precede the quality team, the quality performance team, and that work. This is basically tests running against production on a couple of examples we saw, and a couple of examples that we tracked. The one you're pointing to, the 10K, it's a 10K reference architecture, so we get to experiment with really large data sets. And it's something that our performance team set up to run against. I think it's an environment they set up, picking the code from the nightly, but it's aimed specifically at testing edge cases of large customers. They had different moments in our performance journey. The first one is older, and as you can see, the handbook is outdated. The last numbers we have there is from 2020. Yeah, February 2020, because it's manual. We would have to go in there and take a snapshot. We've eventually evolved to new ones that we just go through the dashboards, and we have those historical things, which is far better. We didn't have that at the time, I think. So yeah, does that help?
Yeah, it does. I think it's in line with what I was thinking. And yeah, I actually thought that the dashboards, the dashboards link from the handbook that open in Grafana, aren't those up to date?
Yeah,
looks like the last update from yesterday.
No, they still run. The dashboard, sorry, the table on the handbook is the one that's outdated.
Okay. Yeah, the table is, yeah, okay, that makes sense. Yep.
They still run.
That's in line with how I was interpreting this. Okay, cool.
There's a couple of other dashboards that we look for. User timing API, which is basically events that we've added to our own applications. It's a little bit buggy because it's always, every time we loads with the snippets, user timing marks. So user API dashboard linky. Oof, that's a long link. So you can play around with that to see, change the page that we're tracking, and you can see the merge request showing the file tree rendered, the first file being started to render, and the last file rendered. That gives you more information about how our apps are behaving. So you do have a couple of more clever dashboards for performance.
Cool. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, one thing that I wanted to share related to this that I'm doing during this quarter is evaluating the large merge requests. Or initially it was to identify opportunities to improve the perception of performance, just doing changes in the user interface without much technical work. And it was it's, I think, interesting because I ended up choosing the same merge requests that we identified as the large merge request for this. Let me share the link to that. And so what I'm thinking about doing, and while we're here, I'm just gonna see if that makes sense from your end. So so in this issue, I linked to these two different merge requests, and one of them is the one we selected. So it's this one, RSpec upgrade. And this merge request is great, but the problem, if I want to go through the usual tasks of commenting, resolving, and all of that, it doesn't work that well because it's already merged. And then there's this closed one, which is also another merge request that we looked at. And my idea is to, for this merge request, which is also a large merge request, is to reopen it and run some of the tasks using this reopened merge request. And so when I reopen it, all of the, I imagine that all of these threads would become unresolved. And then do a similar thing for this merge request, which is to start a new merge request, but reverting the changes. So it won't cover the cases where we're commenting and all of that, but it would cover the case where we're creating a large merge request, and it would take all of the changes here and revert them. So I imagine in theory that it would be just the inverse, right? And I was able to successfully import this project into my local GDK after a long time and a lot of trial and error, but it's there. So that's what I'm planning to do, so that we can have the timings and all of that machine reported information, but also have me and anyone else in the future goes through specific tasks to help identify opportunities to improve the perception of performance. Does that make sense, what I was explaining?
It does. And I did bring it up with Grant on that issue, and his point is that it's just easier to just grab something that already exists. So having a revert of that MR, that's helpful, and we can just import that instead. We should probably get that documented somewhere so that we can use that. Maybe we can go into the OKR issue that we have open and then document it there, that instead of using that one in particular for open state, because it changed quite a bit. And I don't think if you reopen that MR, you'll make the discussions unresolved because they're legacy notes, so they're old. So I don't think they even have, yeah. So it's trickier than that. So by opening the revert, you'll be helpful, but then you don't have the comments. So there's still quite a few. Yeah, we should probably get Tommy involved and get a very robust solution for this, because we need to get this like ironclad, robust example of an MR to reference every time we talk about this.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't remember that these were very old comments. Yeah, let's see. Yeah, I'll do my best with what we have, and even if some of the tasks and flows are not perfect, and even if I have to manually create a comment just to resolve it later, I don't know, we will probably hit some things. So, yeah. But thanks for that. And yeah, my intention is to document this in a testing guide so that later on we can reproduce it manually if we want.
Thanks, Pedro. Anything else? And I guess that's it.
Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.